Arrived in Texas today as the state is still grappling with the devastating flooding caused by Hurricane Harvey. More than a dozen people have been confirmed dead. The rain is still coming down tonight. Fox's Trace Gallagher is in Kingwood, Texas, where he joins us. Trace?
We are in Lake Houston, Tucker, and you got to see this. They just rescued a deer. We're the last rescue boat out here tonight. They've rescued about 400-some people, and some people just won't leave, and they're telling them, look, these boats are going to be ending for the night, so if you see a boat come by, you need to get on it because there might not be another one. As you said, earlier today, President Trump was in Corpus Christi. He and the First Lady were taken to an underground command center, and he got the lay of the land inside there. They gave him the logistics on exactly how much damage has happened in Houston, and they also gave him kind of an outline, if you will, on what needs to be done in this very long recovery. Listen now to the president.
This has been a total cooperative effort. Again, we will see you soon. I will tell you, this is historic. It's epic what happened. But you know what? It happened in Texas, and Texas can handle anything. Thank you all, folks. Thank you.
Yeah, Texas can handle anything. And then the president got a chance to fly over and look at the damage for himself on his way from Corpus Christi to Austin, Texas. And when he got to Austin, Texas, he had a very good understanding that the government is going to be in this for the long haul. Listen again.
The sad thing is that this is long-term. Nobody's ever seen anything this long, and nobody's ever seen this much water in particular. The wind was pretty horrific, but the water has never been seen like this to the extent, and it's maybe someday going to disappear. We keep waiting.
I just want to show you this, Tucker, very quickly, because this is kind of what the president saw from 30,000 feet. Look at this. I mean, these are hundreds of houses in a very upscale neighborhood here in Lake Houston, and the damage is just unfathomable. 400 people taken out on rescue boats. We're among the last of them tonight, Tucker.
And not just people, but deer. Good for them. Thanks a lot, Trace. I appreciate that.
Sure.
With so much going on in Houston and the world, you'd think maybe the press would have more to worry about than what the First Lady wears. But no. After Melania Trump was spotted boarding Air Force One in a pair of high heels, many outlets and pundits decided those heels were proof that the first day Marie Antoinette. The Daily Beast said Melania Trump heads to Houston in hurricane zone in sky-high stilettos. Writer Maria Del Russo dubbed her, quote, flood watch Barbie, and added, quote, this outfit literally screams I'm an out-of-touch elitist, and what is a hurricane? The New York Times tried philosophically to ask the question, when is a shoe not just a shoe? Whether the headlines caused it or not, by the time she landed, Melania Trump had changed into sneakers. She was not seen eating cake. Tammy Bruce is a radio show host, and she joins us tonight. So I'm reading these, Tammy. I'm not much of a huge feminist or anything, but I bet you Maria Del Russo is.
Yeah.
And yet here she is judging a woman on her footwear. That sounds like the war on women to me. I mean, what do I know as a man? Take it away.
Look, clearly a lot of sexism going on there. But you know what it's really based in? They're harpies. They're jealous and they're envious. Melania Trump is a woman who is dressed always appropriately based on the circumstance. She exited the White House in a pair of heels she felt was appropriate, and yet a pair of slacks and a jacket, clearly going to an airplane which already had her change of clothes prepared for her to change into so that she'd be ready for what she needed to be wearing going into that disaster zone. But, you know, the Trump haters, people who prefer to think badly of other people, are going to do this. Also, the First Lady is very well liked. She's had tremendous impact where she goes. She makes a big difference. The president clearly also has helped a lot of people based on his enthusiasm and his encouragement, which is part of his job, of course. And I think they just want to kind of drag other people down. The American people see that for what it is, but I think obviously most of us are very proud of the First Lady.
Well, here's the weird thing. I mean, I don't personally have strong feelings about Melania Trump one way or the other. I don't know her, but I do remember really well the rule that all of us learned during the last campaign. Hillary Clinton taught it to us, and that is when you criticize one woman, you're criticizing all women. An attack on one is an attack against all.
Yeah.
But Melania seems like she's getting an exemption from that. How does this work?
I think that, of course, they're being hypocritical, and they say that when it works for them. At the same time, you've got Melania Trump, who really does exemplify the nature of somebody who is doing what she wants to do, is in charge of her environment, is proud of her appearance, knows what it's like, and chooses to approach being First Lady in a way that it can make all of us proud. But mostly what it is, too, is again, I come back to the issue of what you have like the mean girls at school. You have somebody who comes in, that people are jealous, and then they attack her because either it's unfamiliar or they see what they want to see, because they can't admit that, in fact, this couple is good for the country, that Melania Trump is good also when it comes to the issues she's working on, as a great mother, has a great reputation in New York for how she was taking care of Barron and her household. So I think that this is also, when you're dealing with a group like, I don't know, Vanity Fair and People Magazine, who really make a living on either telling people how to live or highlighting the rich and famous, I think it's a little hypocritical at that point to complain about her.
It's situational feminism. I'd love to get a list of the women who are protected from criticism and those who aren't. Maybe that'll be published someday. Okay, so to CNN. So I got to admit, I feel a little guilty showing this video because I've had some uncomfortable interviews myself. Probably nothing quite like this, though. The network tried to talk to a flood survivor in Houston today and got this response. Watch.
Y'all trying to interview people during their worst times. Like, that's not the smartest thing to do. Like, people are really breaking down, and y'all sitting here with cameras and microphones trying to ask us what the is wrong with me shivering cold, with my kids wet, and you still putting a microphone in my face.
Russell Flores, it sounds like you've got a very upset family there.
Yeah, it does sound like a very upset family, but upset specifically at CNN. I mean, can you think of anything more unsettling, having survived a natural disaster, than dealing with the cable news network?
Well, look, we've seen this, though. This is something that most Americans have wanted to say to reporters who try to catch people at their most vulnerable, either in an evacuation situation, an emergency, at a funeral. It's almost like disaster porn or grief porn. And she said what I think a lot of Americans say when you get into this. But also, I would have to say that with all the new media, with everyone being exposed to so much media and being in the media, I think people might be feeling a lot more comfortable to say what's on their mind these days.
That's probably...
Especially to reporters.
That's apparently true. Tammy Bruce, it's always great to see you. Thank you for that.
Thanks for having me.
A professor at the University of Tampa is out of a job tonight after he suggested that Hurricane Harvey was karmic retribution on the state of Texas for daring to vote as it did in last fall's presidential election. Ed Henry is on this story. He joins us in studio.
Tucker, this truly puts new meaning into the term Trump derangement syndrome. Kenneth Story is, or was, a professor of all things sociology at the University of Tampa. Sunday, in the middle of this epic storm, this man teaching the next generation actually tweeted, "Texans deserved it because," wait for it, "they helped elect Donald Trump." Story tweeting, quote, "I don't believe in instant karma, but this kind of feels like it for Texas. Hopefully this will help them realize the GOP doesn't care about them." Now, you can imagine there was a justifiable freakout on social media. And when people started pressing Story about it, he actually dug in. He doubled down. He tweeted, "Well, the good people there need to do more to stop the evil their state pushes. I'm only blaming those who support the GOP there." How charitable of him to only blame the Republicans and not the Democrats braving the storm. As for whether he was suggesting Trump supporters in Tampa and the rest of the Sunshine State also should suffer from a nasty storm, Story said this, "Yep, those who voted for him here deserve it as well." Well, the professor on Monday tried to change his story, tweeting his regret, swearing he wanted everyone affected by Harvey to recover, and he never meant to wish any ill will on any particular group or party. Not enough for the University of Tampa. Today they fired Story. Quote, "We condemn the comments and the sentiment behind them and understand the pain this irresponsible act has caused. As Floridians, we are well aware of the destruction and suffering associated with tropical weather." Indeed they do, making this all the more horrifying from a professor of sociology, which teaches, yes, the functioning of human society. Tucker.
What percentage of sociology professors do you think agree? In fact, what percentage do you think of faculty lounges are deranged, are certifiable? Like a lot. Like maybe there's something wrong with the system.
I've never gotten a question like that.
And I won't press you to answer it, but I think we all know it's a very high percentage.
How could he do this?
Because
you
he
deserve
lives,
it because you voted
he
for
lives
Donald
in a
Trump.
world. A guy at the college I went to tweeted out, "Let them all die." An entire racial group died because they live in a world where that's okay.
He actually thought he could survive this, and the school, after a Twitter storm, said nope.
The great Ed Henry. Thanks,
Good
Ed.
to see you, buddy.
2 weeks ago, they were peace activists. The press is increasingly aware that Antifa, or is it Antifa, we'll get to the bottom of that in a minute, are actually violent. We'll talk to a journalist who has encountered that violence firsthand. We'll also continue to bring you the latest from Houston, Texas. The rain, remarkably, still falling on that flooded city. Stay tuned. You'll get live pictures of the president coming back from his trip to Texas. He returned after viewing the catastrophic damage there. Back to Andrews Air Force Base, right across the river from Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, back home, people are waking up to the routine violence of left-wing activists at protests. You've seen it a lot in the past couple of weeks. In the name of stopping fascism, agitators are showing up at rallies and quickly getting violent. This past weekend, even the Washington Post was forced, against its will, no question, to admit that violence in Berkeley, California was the work of masked left-wingers. Journalist Tim Pool recently attended one of these rallies and quickly became the target of threats. Watch.
Out! Go! Out! Don't touch me. Out! Bye. Out! Why? Get out of here. Seriously, get the out of here. Like their politics, I am not from phone. Huh? Tough guy.
You believe what they say, though? You really believe them?
So, like, I mean,
That's
do what?
naive.
Well, by the same token,
That's naive.
Why would I? Wow. I'm not a tough guy. I'm a journalist.
I'm not making a joke out of it, though. This is my life.
What's going on here? Get anything that has ever happened or ever existed.
Tim Pool, the man being barked at in that video, joins us, as does former Berkeley radical Donna Carol Voss. Thanks to you both for joining us. First to you, Tim. I watched that whole video yesterday. It's really, really menacing. But it raises the question I've had since the beginning, which is, who are these people? The masked people, the Black Bloc, Antifa, however you're pronouncing it. Where do they come from? Is this a full-time gig? And what do they believe?
It tends to be a mix of people. Predominantly, I've found that they're communists. There's a lot of socialists involved and some anarchists. But typically, I think when you see the violence, the people who are willing to be more violent tend to be communists. That's more of a, I guess, structured ideology, whereas the anarchists are kind of a little loose and don't believe in the authority. But that video is not even the worst. You know, that's just one of the most recent. This guy didn't even touch me. But I've been physically attacked by people associated with the far left and Antifa in the past. And this is, like I said, just one of the more recent instances where they've confronted me for seemingly no reason. I mean, this guy doesn't know me. He doesn't know what I'm doing. I was just walking by in Boston with a camera, and immediately I got bombarded by a group of people with masks on just yelling at me.
Right. If you're looking for the face of hate, it's that right there. But by the way, there have been a bunch of mugshots of these guys after getting arrested, and without the face coverings, they're mostly young, middle-class white kids. Not a very diverse group, interestingly enough. So, Donna, you were a campus radical some time ago in Berkeley, a part of an earlier generation. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the generation you belonged to had strong political views, ones I disagree with, but at its core, there was a belief in free speech, wasn't there?
Absolutely. That's Berkeley. That's free speech.
Well, that's gone. And not only is it gone, I don't hear anybody mourning its passing. I don't hear, I mean, presumably a lot of mainstream liberals still believe in free speech. It was, you know, one of the pillars of their movement, of what they believe. But I don't hear them standing up to demand the right of others they disagree with to have their say. Why?
No, I should have said that was Berkeley. It's ironic that it was Berkeley for free speech, and now it's where, you know, Ground Central is for eliminating, crushing free speech. Every protest now is being crushed. Doesn't matter who it is or what it is.
Well, it's really, really noticeable. Tim, what do they want? What does this group want?
Unfortunately, I mean, it's not one group of people. It's just, it tends to be a fractured group of people who share enough of their ideologies that they're willing to get violent to do it. Often I find that many of them truly believe they're fighting a revolution against, the empire of the United States. And I will say that some of these people have legitimate grievances, but as soon as they decide to get violent to push those ideas, they discredit themselves. But, unfortunately, I don't think there's a unified cause behind them. Many of the people that we're seeing today associated with Antifa were just anti-capitalist protesters 4 years ago. Say at Occupy Wall Street, they would chant anticapitalista. Today, they chant antifascista. So it's hard to pin down exactly what, as a single group or as a single ideology, what they're trying to do is, because it tends to change with the trend.
Well, that's kind of the point I'm making. We were forever trying to book some of these people because I'm sincerely interested in what they're after. But Donna, I mean, if you look back at the protest movements of 50 years ago, almost all of them had a specific goal, either, a civil rights bill, end the Vietnam War, end to segregated accommodations. I don't think I understand what the goal of this group is other than burning everything down. Do you?
That's the goal. They have no driving philosophy. They are just all about anarchy. And if there's even a couple of anarchists in there, it makes the whole group anarchist. That's all they want, I think, is anarchy. That's why they fight against free speech in Boston or against anti-racism in Berkeley. It doesn't matter what. If people are out there expressing themselves, Antifa's there to shut them down.
Yeah, well, it's obviously a fight against civilization itself, and we should all join in fighting back, I think, because that's threatening. Tim, Donna, thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Rowe has kept himself away from partisan politics. He's a smart man, but one man online baited him and tried to lump him in with radical crazies. Mike Rowe will respond to that person next. Maybe the most articulate response we've aired in a long time. Stay tuned. Another live look at flooding in the city of Houston. Dams have been breaching today, ominously. As the president returns from touring the damage, we'll continue to track developments there. And, of course, we'll keep you updated as we get them. Mike Rowe is a champion of working Americans. He promotes the dignity of honest blue-collar labor and the people who do it. He doesn't talk about politics very much because why would he? But recently, an online critic tried to claim that Rowe was promoting, quote, white nationalism simply by being apolitical. Here's how Rowe responded. Hi, Chuck. Allow me to say how much I dislike your post. Everything about it annoys me. Your smug and snarky tone, your appalling grammar, your complete lack of evidence to support your claims, and, of course, the overarching logical fallacy that informs your entire position. It's worth reading. If you haven't already, go to Google. Meantime, Mike Rowe joins us tonight. Good to see you, Mike.
Hey, Tucker, how are you?
Probably my favorite response I've read in a long time. Allow me to say how much I disliked your post. But he
got me at a weak moment.
Well, it's interesting, though, because you went on to kind of concede part of his point when you said, actually, I don't address politics. And you had this line in here. I underlined it because I liked it so much. I'm quoting, I can't think of a single celebrity whose political opinion I value, and I'm not going to assume the country feels any differently about mine. I love that.
Well, I occupy some weird real estate, because I run a nonpartisan foundation, and I use Facebook extensively, both to raise money and to get the word out about closing the skills gap and our work ethic scholarship program. And when you run a foundation like that, you come face to face with all kinds of educational topics. You come face to face with all sorts of work-related things. And today, as you certainly know, everything is politicized. But those two topics in particular, they break down. So I normally don't respond online to people who call me names. I don't care. I actually kind of like it. But this guy conflated racism with politics, with my foundation, and really in a kind of a tautological, rhetorical way wound up insulting 5 million of my friends and supporters. So, look, 200 years ago it would have been pistols at dawn. Today, it's like, okay, if this is what we're going to do, please come back with some organized thoughts and make a persuasive case. Otherwise, don't.
Well, you certainly won that engagement. I'm not sure I can do this justice, but you have this. You're trying to explain why his logic doesn't hold up. and you use the same set of reasoning, the same method of reasoning to explain why he himself is a bigot based on his spelling. Can you explain to our audience how you did that?
Well, I think in the very first line, what Chuck basically did was he worked off an assumption, and the assumption was white nationalists and white supremacists are all academic, the opposite of academic elitists. They think everybody who went to college is an elitist. He then argued that Republicans are promoting anti-intellectualism as a trope. By conflating white supremacy and Republican dogma without offering any proof, he essentially pivoted and said, Republicans love you, conservatives love you, ergo white nationalists love you, and because you've remained silent in the face of recent events, then you in fact are tacitly endorsing their love of bad things vis-a-vis their affection for your foundation. It was a very odd, oblique, and nuanced kind of argument, but it's not unusual. You know, it's kind of like saying because all of the terrorists on 9/11 were Muslim and from Saudi Arabia, then everybody who's Muslim from Saudi Arabia is a terrorist. So it's really just very basic, but it's become kind of insidious, and everywhere you turn, if you look for logical fallacies nowadays, you'll find them. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting one.
Well, it's like a negative challenge. Prove you're not. I mean, well, I guess what I was struck by in the whole thing was that you're studiously non-political. I mean, that you've chosen, as you just explained, chosen not to be political in public, and that itself is taken as a political statement in this moment. I mean, what does that say about where we're living right now?
Well, it means that the country is sad. It means the country feels bad. And part of the reason we feel bad collectively, my humble view, is because everywhere we look, veins are bulging and spittle is flying and people are making all kinds of bad arguments. I'm not even talking about a reasonable disagreement between themes or topics. I'm talking about the flawed logic that allows all kinds of crazy things to be said on both sides of the aisle.
That's right.
That's really what strikes me. And look, I typically don't wade into it, but when you essentially argue that people who go to college wind up doing X, Y, and Z, and people who don't go to college wind up waving the wrong flag at the wrong rally and becoming a de facto white supremacist, then you're not only generalizing, you're using our educational system as the proximate cause, not of intelligence or knowledge, but of racism. And that's crazy. No, and it's happening all of the time. So you're guilty, not for what you say. Yeah, you're just guilty because you didn't rush to condemn a flood after it rained. Why would you do that? It's self-evident.
I know. Well, I love the fact you're not political. You've got a show launching overnight. It's on we're linking to it on our Facebook page. What is it about?
Look, I'm not even sure it's a show. It's called Returning the Favor, and it's the first thing Facebook is doing in terms of content. And we had a really candid conversation, not unlike the one we're having right now months ago. And they were like, what do you want to do? And I said, what I would love to do is a show that proves that not everybody in the country is a schmuck. And they're like, well, how would you do it? And so I've been working with this production company called Hudson. And we basically said, let's just find people who do nice things. Let's go hang out with them, and then let's surprise them by doing something outrageously nice for them. It debuted today. People seem to dig it. And more than anything else, Tucker, I'm just like, look, Dirty Jobs was a love letter to hard work and people. This is the same thing. It's not focused on work so much. It's just focused on what we're about to see in Houston. You watch. You're going to see people come from all over the country to help. And we're going to feel better when we watch that. My operating premise is if you watch enough knuckleheads protesting over here about this, and if you watch enough racists over there about that, pretty soon, that's what you're going to assume the whole country is full of that.
And that's why your show is going to be the biggest thing on Facebook. I predict that. In fact, I bet money on it. Mike Rowe, thank you. Great to see you.
I'm not going to bet against you. Thank you, Tucker.
See you, man. You've heard it before. Trump is Mussolini, Vladimir Putin, literally Hitler. But a Black Lives Matter co-founder is going all the way. She says Trump has a plan to exterminate people. We'll show you what she said coming up. Plus, we'll continue to give you every update, good and bad, human and deer-related, from the city of Houston. We'll be right back. Well, comparisons between President Trump and Adolf Hitler are lame and historically absurd, but people keep making them. There's a whole cable channel for it, actually. Patrisse Cullors is one of the 3 co-founders of Black Lives Matter, apparently because she lacks better rhetorical points. She said President Trump is just like Hitler, right down to seeking to exterminate millions of people. Watch this.
We wouldn't, as a movement, take a seat at the table with Trump because we wouldn't have done that with Hitler. Trump is literally the epitome of evil. All the evils of this country, be it racism, capitalism, sexism, homophobia, resist him, and to resist every single policy that he's implemented that impacts our communities. And I think if I'm thinking about what I want my children to know in 30, 40, 50 years, I want them to know that I resisted a president at all costs, because this president literally tried to kill our communities.
LaDawn Jones is a Democratic strategist, and she joins us tonight. Thanks for coming on, LaDawn. So I'm watching that, and I'm thinking that we're not really in the realm of political debate here. That's what extremism looks like. I mean, if by definition, if you really believe someone is Hitler, you wouldn't debate his policies. You'd do what Dietrich Bonhoeffer tried to do. You tried to take him out by force. So, do you think she really means that when she says he's like Hitler?
She absolutely means it, and I completely agree with her. You know, Trump's policies have been ratcheting up over the time of him running his campaign until now, just recently with him pardoning the Arizona sheriff. It is becoming very concerning, and people like Black Lives Matter and the other folks who are watching and have known that he will be a problem have the right to teach and get people prepared to resist him at all costs. Now, we are still a democracy, so we're not going to try to remove him from office by force, but we are certainly not going to allow him to ruin our country, which we believe is his plan.
What does that mean at all costs, though? I mean, what does that mean? It obviously doesn't mean at all costs, right? I mean, you're engaging in overstatement, I assume.
It may be overstatement, but let's be very honest about what all costs means. That means we have to make sure that we have people at our local and state levels that are going to combat some of these Trump-like policies. We're going to make sure that even though he is encouraging the police to hurt individuals who have not even been adjudicated guilty, that we teach people in our communities that will not be accepted. That is at all costs. We will not allow him to take over our media by trying to scapegoat them and all the other minorities in the community. We are going to fight back. That is at all
costs.
Hold on. So
the media is a minority group now?
No. Let me be clear. He both scapegoats the media and he scapegoats minority groups separately, but both of those things were characteristics that Hitler used in order to have his reign during his regime. He tried to make it as though all the Jews were the reason why Germans could not succeed, just like Trump tries to say that all the minorities and the immigrants are the reason why Americans can't have jobs.
Without getting into some deep history conversation, I get it, but I wonder,
bad news and fake news.
Right. He says things you disagree with, for sure, but did Hitler have a lot of media against him in Germany after he took power? Did he have people like you going on TV calling him names? Was there any opposition to Hitler allowed in public?
Well, what Hitler did is first he changed everybody's ideology, and then after he did that, he then only limited to certain media outlets that he himself would allow for people to learn from. And that's exactly what we see Trump trying to do. He's trying to make it so that people don't trust the media, and once they don't trust the media, now he's making his own Trump television so that he can put out all of his rhetoric, and the people who are following him are going to believe him, and those are the kind of people that Hitler used to take over.
Okay. Let's ask you a question. So I assume it's an article of faith with you and with many others in Black Lives Matter that Trump is a bigot. If you found out that Trump or any of his supporters had a meeting or a party and excluded people who were not white from that event, what would you say about that?
then I would say for Trump, that's probably par for the course. I would not be surprised if Trump has already had several meetings in which he excludes people who are not of color. You can look at the pictures of his roundtable, of his interns, of everyone who he has
just to be
working for
clear,
them. With the exception of Omarosa and Ben Carson, he pretty much has already done that.
So, I mean, there's no evidence for what you said, but we know for a fact that Black Lives Matter across the country in a bunch of different cities, this is not speculation, it's a fact, they've said it, they've talked about it, has excluded people who weren't black. Why is that not racist? If you're an anti-racist organization, why are you excluding people on the basis of their skin color?
I don't know which Black Lives Matter events you've gone to, but I've gone to several Black Lives Matter protests, and there are people of all colors, races, and origins.
In Philadelphia, in New York, in Nashville.
Hold on,
slow down. No, hold on. No, the Black Lives Matter Twitter account said very clearly it referred to specific events as, quote, black only. There were a bunch of news stories about it. I'm not making this up. I've done interviews about it before. But it gets to a core question, which is how can you be against racism while committing it? It's a definition of racism to prevent people from coming to something based on how they look, based on their race. I think you would agree with that. You already did agree with that. So how can Black Lives Matter commit racism and be against it at the same time?
I don't believe Black Lives Matter commits racism. I do believe that they make a platform for African Americans to be able to have discussion about things that are important to them. But let's say the most important difference between Black Lives Matter. They're not elected president of the United States.
They're not, and I'm not saying they are. I'm not saying they have as much power as Trump or anything like that. I'm just saying in New York City, there was a black-only Memorial Day party. Same thing in Philadelphia. Again, Detroit and Nashville. The leadership on your social media was asked, is it black-only? Yes, it is. They said that, yes, it's black-only. That seems like the textbook dictionary definition of racism. How can you be involved in a group that does that? That's my question to you. And please give me a real answer.
Again, you know, I can't speak to the Memorial Day event that you're discussing, but
it's not just one event; it's a bunch. I'm sure, but there are specific events from which people have been excluded based on their race. And isn't that what racism is? I'm against that. I thought you were too. Why would you be part of a group that did that?
You know, I won't say that they have because I wasn't there. What I will say is that the actual Black Lives Matter events that I have participated in, that I have direct knowledge and experience with, every single time there were people of every shade and color across the rainbow that were there supporting what Black Lives Matter is about. See, what you're trying to do is make Black Lives Matter.
I'm not trying to do anything other than report what is factually true, and I don't want you to skip out on answering a really important question, which is it wrong to exclude people on the basis of their race? Yes or no? Is that racism or is it not?
If you are excluding people based on their race with the intent of trying to subject the other races to some type of harm, danger, to subject them to systemic racism, exclude them, then yes, it's a problem.
Okay.
Oh, yes, it's absolutely about your intent.
Okay.
Why doesn't it?
Right,
you know, see, that's the problem. You want to compare race.
Right. You just don't want to take accountability for what is clearly racist. Thanks for joining us tonight, LaDawn. Seattle's $25 gun tax was supposed to fix violent crime. A lot of people thought it would happen. Weirdly, shootings went up. Now, some are saying they ought to double the tax. Will that work? We'll talk to a supporter of it next. Two years ago, Seattle introduced a gun tax on all guns and ammunition sold in the city. The justification was it would raise money and it would reduce gun violence. Well, the tax has been successful in that it has driven most gun sales into the suburbs, but it's raised far less revenue than expected, and it has done nothing to lower crime. Shootings, in fact, are up substantially this year. So what do? Well, of course, the only proper response to a failed policy is to double down. It's called faith-based policymaking. City Council candidate John Grant says the city ought to double the tax to raise more money. Mark Glaze is an anti-gun activist, senior advisor to Guns Down. He joins us tonight. Now, Mark, I know that as someone who believes in science, we were just talking about science in the commercial break.
We love science.
And you're fealty to it.
Yeah.
That you want to go by the data. Okay,
right.
So if I sell a policy on the basis of a promised outcome, and that outcome not only fails to materialize, but the opposite happens, then I probably ought to pause and rethink my assumptions. But that doesn't seem to be the case here.
Well, look, the reason the city council decided to impose this gun tax is to raise some money to do gun violence research. It didn't raise as much money as they hoped, so why not keep trying?
Because that's not what happened, as you know.
What happened?
the purpose of this was, as you're right, revenue. Of course, all governments want more money.
Right.
But the idea was if you tax something, it will reduce its use.
Well, right.
And in fact, the opposite happened. And by the way, I'm not going to demagogue this. I'm not blaming this stupid law for the increase in violence in Seattle.
Right.
I'm merely saying it had no effect.
Right.
We know that for sure.
Well, for one thing, the city council actually says, and I think legally they have to say this, that the idea was not to retard the sale of guns in the way that we do with other kinds of sin taxes. They say it's just about revenue. But in fairness, if you actually want to raise more money and you actually want to discourage gun purchases by raising taxes, they should do it statewide. Otherwise, what's happening, as you said earlier, is that it's just driving gun sales out of Seattle and into the suburbs where they don't have this
There's
tax.
no reason the city of Seattle, which can't keep its sidewalks clean, as you know, should be doing scientific research into gun violence. I mean, that's just like not the proper role of a city, obviously. And there's no, I mean, it would be totally politicized. But do you think it's interesting anyway that violence went up after this? Like, what does that tell you about gun control?
Well, I think it's correlation, not causation.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. But can you think of a state, any state in America, where there's a direct connection between gun laws, gun control laws, and lowered violence? I see the opposite. I see the most liberal gun states, Vermont being the most liberal. It's got one of the lowest murder rates in the country. Same with New Hampshire.
Well, that's because it's country. But I'll give you a counterexample. I used to work for Mike Bloomberg, the mayor of New York. New York is the safest big city of its size anywhere in the country, and part of the reason is it's very hard to carry a gun there. They don't hand out many permits for that. That's a good example.
Not true, because actually New York City has had roughly the same gun laws. Only rich and famous people can get guns, and trust me, they do. Average people are totally shafted for generations, and it was one of the most dangerous cities in the country. 20 years ago, it became, we have no idea why it became safer, actually. I wrote a whole book on this, and we don't really know. But we know that the gun laws have remained the same. So if easy access to guns makes for a dangerous place, why is Wyoming so safe?
Well, for one thing, I mean, there are plenty of gun deaths in Wyoming. They don't usually happen as a result of crime. They happen as a result of accidents and other things. But a good counterexample is California. They have some of the toughest gun laws in the country. It's a big, huge state, as you know, and they have comparatively low rates of gun violence. I think that there's causation there. Tougher gun laws means lower crime rates.
Huh. What about Chicago?
Chicago is a tough example, but part of the reason it makes sense to have federal gun laws is that while Chicago has really tough gun laws, people who want to get guns on the criminal market just have to leave Chicago.
But actually, that's not really the problem.
Sure.
And as you know as well as I, gun control is not really about making a city or a state or a country safer. It's about controlling the population and disarming them.
Oh, come on.
If that weren't the case, then I emphatically do believe it. I do believe it. I think it's obvious from the behavior of gun control people like this lunatic in Washington State who, after watching this law fail, is pushing to double down. It tells you everything. It's not about making the city safer. It's getting more dangerous.
Look,
but they don't care.
All I can tell you is that, I've been doing this work for like 10 years.
Yeah.
Nobody who does this stuff is actually concerned about controlling the populace. They actually don't want 90 people to be killed with guns in this country every day, which is something that does not happen in other countries that look and feel a lot like us.
There aren't that many countries that look and feel a lot like. It's actually a little more complicated than you're suggesting. But I wonder if guns are so bad, and people often say this, but I've never gotten a real answer. Why does Mike Bloomberg have armed bodyguards?
Well,
I don't get it. Like, if I run a bodega in the Bronx, I don't get to carry a gun. I'm in a lot of danger. Mike Bloomberg doesn't think I should have a gun. I can't be trusted. And yet he runs around because he's a billionaire with all these guys with automatic weapons. Why is that fair for him but not for the bodega guy?
But guess what he's protecting himself against? Bad guys with guns.
What about the bodega owner? He's not allowed to have a gun, but Mike Bloomberg is because his life is more valuable?
Well, look, I don't
think it's more valuable.
I think people like Mike Bloomberg, like you, might be targets because you're in the public eye.
Mike Bloomberg's a total hypocrite, actually. I mean, if guns are so bad, then why does he surround himself with them? And again, people at real risk, delivery men, can't have them.
Look, people who are in the public eye are at higher risk. I don't begrudge them having bodyguards, but the best solution to that, so that Mike Bloomberg and you don't need bodyguards, is to actually go upstream in the problem and make sure the bad guys can't get guns in the first place.
The second Bloomberg disarms, I'll be next. I promise.
I'll hold you to it.
Great to see you, Mark.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Up next, we'll have the latest on the deadly flooding in Houston, Texas. Stay tuned. I want to bring you back to our Hurricane Harvey coverage. Hillary Vaughn is in Kingwood, Texas. That's just northeast of the city of Houston. She joins us now for an update on the flooding there, which is profound. Well, I can tell it is. Describe where you are right now, Hillary.
We're actually in a commercial/residential area, Tucker, and right now the final fleet of rescue crews are headed out, navigating these neighborhoods before curfew tonight. We've seen hundreds of people rescued. This is a task force of volunteers that are saving these people's lives. Conditions here, though, are increasingly dangerous. The river rapids from the San Jacinto River are now pouring through this community. Rescue crews have capsized because underneath this brown, murky water are submerged fire hydrants, cars underwater, street signs that boats are crashing into. The sheriff's deputy told me his boat hit a light post, and he said the current almost ripped him away. But all these boats need fuel to rescue these people, and one Texas rancher from Bryan, Texas, has been sustaining this entire rescue operation. He brought 600 gallons of fuel with him, and he literally has been keeping this rescue operation afloat. They vacant houses, marking them with spray paint, but a lot of people still don't want to leave, and most of them, once night comes, probably won't be able to. Tucker.
That is the most self-sufficient state out of 50. It is remarkable. Hillary, thanks a lot for that update. It's going to be a long night in Kingwood. Thank you. That's about it for us tonight. Unfortunately, tune in every night at 8 to the show that's the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. DVR it if you haven't already. Our friends at The Five are ready to go.